Imagine a car so rare that most people will live their entire lives without ever seeing one. Not on the street, not at a car show, not even in a museum. A car that exists mostly in whispers, photographs, and locked garages. A car that feels more like a rumor than a machine. Only a few hundred were ever built, and fewer still remain exactly as they were intended to be. Most are hidden away now, preserved behind glass, protected from sunlight, time, and human hands. And yet, right now, you're looking at one of them. This is not just a Ferrari. This is not simply an old supercar or a valuable collector's item. This is a machine born from ambition, fear, obsession, and an era of motorsport that no longer exists. This is a legend that almost never had the chance to prove itself. A car that was built for war only to arrive after the battlefield had already burned to the ground. This is the Ferrari 288 GTO. To understand why this car matters, you have to understand Ferrari itself. Ferrari has never been just a car company. From the very beginning, it was a racing team that happened to sell road cars to fund its obsession with winning. Enzo Ferrari did not care about luxury in the way other manufacturers did. He cared about dominance. He cared about beating rivals. He cared about building machines that could push drivers to the edge of fear and beyond. Every Ferrari that truly matters carries that DNA inside it. By the early 1980s, the automotive world was changing rapidly. Technology was advancing at an alarming rate. Turbocharging was rewriting the rules of power. Aerodynamics were becoming more aggressive. And motorsport, especially rallying, had entered a period of madness. At the center of this madness was Group B. Group B racing was unlike anything before or since. It was the most dangerous, most powerful, and most spectacular form of motorsport ever sanctioned. The rules were minimal. Manufacturers were allowed to build extreme machines with enormous power and barely any restrictions, as long as they produced a small number of road-legal versions. Safety was an afterthought. Speed was everything. The result was a class of cars that were faster than the roads they raced on and more powerful than most drivers could truly control. Audi, Peugeot, Lancia, and others were already deep into Group B development. They were winning. They were innovating. And Ferrari, watching from the outside, felt something it could not tolerate: irrelevance. Ferrari had always been associated with racing supremacy, yet here was a category rewriting history without them. Ferrari wanted in, but Ferrari didn't want to merely participate. Ferrari wanted to dominate. The problem was that Group B demanded a very specific kind of car. It needed to be light, brutally powerful, aerodynamically aggressive, and homologated for road use. Ferrari could not simply adapt an existing model. They needed to build something new, something uncompromising, something dangerous. And so, quietly, without fanfare, Ferrari engineers began working on a car that would become one of the most important vehicles the company ever produced. The project was not designed for comfort or mass production. It was not created to impress wealthy buyers or journalists. It was designed to win races that might kill the driver in the process. The result was the Ferrari 288 GTO. The name itself carried weight. GTO stood for Gran Turismo Omologato, a designation reserved only for Ferrari's most serious racing machines. Before the 288 GTO, only 2 cars had ever worn that badge. Both were legends. Both were built with racing in mind. Giving this new car the GTO name was not nostalgia. It was a warning. The number 288 referred to the engine. 2.8 liters, 8 cylinders. But that simple description hides something far more significant. This engine was twin-turbocharged, a rare and controversial choice for Ferrari at the time. Enzo Ferrari himself famously disliked turbocharging for road cars, believing it dulled throttle response and corrupted the purity of driving. Yet necessity overruled philosophy. To compete in Group B, Ferrari needed power, and turbocharging was the fastest path to it. The engineers mounted the engine longitudinally, pushing it far back into the chassis for better weight distribution. The car used extensive composite materials to reduce weight. Kevlar, fiberglass, and steel were combined to create a structure that was both light and brutally rigid. The suspension was race-derived. The brakes were massive. The tires were wide and unforgiving. This was not a car that wanted to be gentle. It was a car that demanded respect. When the 288 GTO was unveiled, it did not look like a flamboyant supercar. It looked purposeful, aggressive, almost understated compared to later Ferraris. The flared arches, the deep front air dam, the massive rear haunches, all of it existed for function, not beauty. And yet, somehow, it was beautiful precisely because of that honesty. Ferrari planned to build just enough cars to satisfy homologation requirements. Initially, the number was around 200. Eventually, production settled at 272 units. That number alone places the 288 GTO among the rarest Ferraris ever made. But rarity alone does not create legends. Context does. At the time of its creation, the 288 GTO was one of the fastest road cars in the world. Its acceleration was violent. Its turbochargers delivered power in a sudden, overwhelming surge. This was not a smooth car. It was raw. It demanded skill. Mistakes were punished immediately. In an era without modern traction control or electronic safety nets, the 288 GTO offered nothing but honesty. And yet, for all its aggression, it was still street legal. You could, in theory, drive this racing weapon through traffic. You could idle at stoplights. You could park it on a public street. The absurdity of that fact cannot be overstated. This was a Group B car in disguise, pretending to be civilized. But before the 288 GTO could fulfill its destiny, the world changed. Group B racing collapsed almost overnight. A series of horrific accidents claimed the lives of drivers and spectators alike. The danger had become impossible to ignore. The governing bodies stepped in. Group B was banned. Just like that, the most extreme era of motorsport ended. For Ferrari, the consequences were devastating. The 288 GTO had been built specifically to compete in Group B without Group B. It had no purpose, no battlefield, no enemy. The car that was designed to dominate racing never raced at all. From one perspective, the 288 GTO was a failure. It never achieved what it was created to do. It never won a championship. It never proved itself in competition. It was a weapon that never fired a shot. But history is not always kind to logic. Over time, people began to realize what the 288 GTO truly represented. It was the last Ferrari built with pure racing intent before safety regulations and corporate caution softened the edges of performance. It was a snapshot of an era when manufacturers were willing to risk everything in pursuit of speed. It was a reminder of what happens when ambition is left unchecked. Ferrari itself understood this. The lessons learned from the 288 GTO did not go to waste. Engineers took everything they had learned about turbocharging, lightweight construction, aerodynamics, and raw performance and pushed it even further. The result was the Ferrari F40. The F40 is often celebrated as the greatest Ferrari ever made. It was faster, more aggressive, and more uncompromising than almost anything before it. But without the 288 GTO, the F40 would not exist. The 288 GTO was the foundation, the prototype, the rehearsal for greatness. As the years passed, collectors began to understand the significance of the 288 GTO. It wasn't just rare. It wasn't just valuable. It was historically important. It represented a turning point. A moment when Ferrari stood at the edge of madness and leaned forward instead of stepping back. Today, the Ferrari 288 GTO is worth millions of dollars. Prices continue to climb as collectors compete for the few remaining examples. Some cars are locked away, never driven, preserved as static investments. Others are exercised carefully, brought out for special events, allowed to breathe and move just enough to remind the world that they are still alive. There is an ongoing debate among collectors. Should cars like the 288 GTO be driven or preserved? Is it disrespectful to rack up mileage on something so rare? Or is it more disrespectful to let a machine built for speed rot in silence? Those who have driven a 288 GTO describe an experience unlike anything else. The turbo lag, the sudden explosion of power, the mechanical noise, the sense that the car is barely contained. This is not a car that flatters its driver. It exposes them. And that is exactly why it matters. The 288 GTO is not perfect. It is not comfortable. It is not forgiving. But it is honest. It tells you exactly what it is, and it never apologizes. Only a few hundred people will ever own one of these cars. Even fewer will ever truly understand what it represents. Most of us will only experience it through stories, videos, and imagination. But perhaps that is fitting, because the 288 GTO was never meant for everyone. It was meant for a moment in time, a moment of excess, a moment of danger, a moment when the pursuit of speed outweighed the fear of consequences. That moment is gone now, but the car remains, waiting, silent, dangerous, legendary. This is not just a Ferrari. This is the Ferrari 288 GTO, a car that arrived too late to race, but early enough to change history forever. This is Ghost Horse Classics, where legends don't die, they wait,